It is Friday, January 2nd. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another 2026 episode of LTPS. As always, let's begin with our PS Plus reminder. This is your final warning for the December 2025 PS Plus Essential lineup. Claim those games before they go away. This coming Tuesday on the 6th, it's going to change over to Need for Speed Unbound on PlayStation 5, Disney Epic Mickey Rebrushed PS4, PS5, and Core Keeper on PS4 and PS5 as well. Which I would say, not too bad of a month. Core Keeper, I know, is a game you can spend like 50 to 100 something hours on that game because it's a survival sandbox style game. So based on the gameplay loop, you're either going to really fall in love with it, or for some, I know that's an immediate write-off just looking at it, but it does appear to be very addictive if you fall in love with it. I'm very happy with Need for Speed Unbound. I almost bought that game recently with that Best Buy $10 certificate they sometimes throw at you. So the game was on sale for $20. It would have been net a little over $10, but I instead bought Life is Strange Double Exposure. That was the good call there, so I'll have that copy. Unbound goes into Plus very soon, so that's good. And then, Epic Mickey's pretty, not a bad game, but you sort of know what you're getting into there because it's an existing game that already came out years ago, so otherwise, though, not too bad of a lineup, I would say. Very curious how Sony's PS Plus spend is going to look going into 2026, as everything around us is just so obscenely expensive. And, during certain new quarters, it seems like Sony is very slow, and then the latter half of the year might get a lot better. As we saw with 2025, we had some amazing months on Plus, but it was really more the back half of 2025. Moving on to our first news story, there was a very big breakthrough in the PS5 jailbreaking hacking community. This happened on December 31st, very recently, where over on the PS Dev Wiki and then also shared around through private discords, there was a big data dump where it was allegedly the PlayStation 5's boot ROM keys. In layman's terms, the PS5 boot ROM keys are level 0 security access on the console. These are encryption keys that are in read-only memory, and they're etched into the console's APU. So this is very similar to when PS3 keys were leaked online all those years ago, if you remember that fiasco. This is not something that Sony can easily patch out without, to be overly technical, without, in theory, doing some kind of path here that in essence does break and completely upend the way the console by design mounts disc-based games or launches digital games completely offline. So that's what we mean by level 0 security access, in that it is physically on the motherboard etched into the APU for these encryption keys. And that's what's used to keep the console offline, to mount disc-based games, or to have offline play possible for games that are locally stored and downloaded on the console. So with those keys out there, it completely upends that entire design of how PlayStation 5 does function and launch those games for Sony security clearance and Sony approved code. So with all that in mind, the much more likely scenario, which Sony has done before in order to address this, is that Sony would have to manufacture a new motherboard revision with a different APU that carries new ROM keys and additional security layers. So with all that in mind, this in theory means the console has a more reliable path of running unsigned code, pirated games, and loading a different OS. And it could also greatly help in reverse engineering games for emulation purposes on PC. Now, I'm also going to add here that with a big caveat, since I myself am not deeply involved in the homebrew and hacking scene, but it's my understanding that there are still other things needed to fully crack the console, like the NAND groups on the board, that are considered critical. So, as I understand it right now, it's not fully cracked and opened, and that means much earlier jailbreaks can happen with certain firmware updates, and so it's not quite to that degree yet, although I would still think, assuming this is legitimate, it's going to be deeply concerning for Sony, a console that is still highly relevant right now, and based on our recent rumor from this past Tuesday that we went over about how all the manufacturers, at least more pertinently Sony and Microsoft, are considering not doing next gen until maybe later than they were planning. That is a fundamental issue with the amount of consoles that they have out there right now and are continuing to sell for the foreseeable future, knowing that a very critical security layer for the console has potentially been breached. So it's something that they're probably very concerned with this. And it would, to address it really is the motherboard revision, which at this point in the game, it really, even that is a Band-Aid fix because you've still got 90-something million consoles in circulation that, in theory, these keys are now out there. So we'll keep following this, obviously. We only cover homebrew and jailbreaking stuff when it's a big breakthrough like this in particular. So I wouldn't expect major updates unless we find out exactly what's going on here. But otherwise, that's at least the situation as I understand it right now. Moving on to some video game news, where Hideo Kojima over on their personal X account has given us an update on their projects as we go into the new year, or as we are currently in the new year, and what we can expect from Kojima Productions. So he did say that right now they're going to continue development on OD. That's still going strong, and they're going to move forward on preparing PHYSINT, and that's going to include casting actors, scanning, and doing performance capture shoots. And they'll also be pushing forward with the live-action Death Stranding movies and also the animation projects, or the one Death Stranding movie and the other animation projects, because, well, that's the thing. Kojima's got a lot of stuff going on, so OD, PHYSINT's going to really be starting to ramp up as well, because it sounds like OD is getting closer and closer to shipping. Not saying that's like right around the corner, but obviously as the sort of production flow happens with the studio, they'll have more and more people shift over to PHYSINT, which is a game likely still very far away. But, with Kojima, at least you get these updates on a game that you think is really far away, and it is, but they are at least being very open about the process of where they are with that particular game. So it's still cool to hear, and 2026 right now is still relatively quiet as far as like relevant game news goes, but it was cool to see one from Kojima as we kick off the new year. Next up, we've got some trouble in paradise going on for one game in particular, part of the China Hero Project program, which we've been following the programs for a little bit now for all the hero projects that Sony has been doing. And one game, Convallaria, has not been turning out so good, apparently, or at least that studio's relationship with SIE. So this game you might not even remember. It was announced a while ago. I think it was in the second or third wave of the China Hero program, but it's a co-op third-person shooter. So Convallaria actually disappeared from Sony's webpage for the program very recently, within the last 1 or 2 months. And this is in light of the studio Longforce making accusations about repeated delays and lack of publishing direction, getting removed from the marketing materials. There's been payment disputes and some structural changes to the program that caused more issues. So one example was SIE was allegedly only using Virtuos for outsourcing resources, so there was no approval or developer bidding process that Longforce themselves had any say in. And there's actually a lot here. It runs much more deep than we can cover at a sort of cursory glance on LTPS, but I was very surprised to see just how much there really was. I guess one of the big fundamental issues was the new leadership that came in to lead that program around 2022, and so seems like a whole mess. And there's other sources that are claiming that that's been the experience for others in the program as well. So it's tough to say exactly which direction this is really swinging, because it could very easily be a he said she said kind of thing, even though SIE is going to be very quiet on an issue quite like this. Almost always they try to sweep these things under the rug because they're a big company. They don't want that bad PR. So perhaps with this maybe gaining some more attention, they will do right by the studio, or perhaps break them out of the program because for whatever reason, maybe there's other things that they themselves are not being open about. But it's hard to say, right? You never want to victim blame, obviously, and it sounds like they've been in a tough spot with payment disputes in particular. That's the very turbulent thing about game development, is you need the money to keep coming in, and if you don't have that, well, that's a very tough position to be in, working for free. So it's tough to really say. I'll keep my eyes on the story and see where this one goes. But if anything, it would be a great shame to see that what is a program that's supposed to foster talent and give these developers crucial funding to get their games out the door, it would be a shame to see that this is the experience they're having. Now, like I mentioned earlier, this week was definitely a little bit slower, so that always happens during the New Year period. And that's probably why we saw a lot of headlines out of this one podcast in particular, where it was the former chairman of Worldwide Studios, Shawn Layden, the long-standing PlayStation executive that left abruptly in 2019 and has since then been doing some consulting for Tencent and traveling around the world and talking to developers and doing various talks and podcast appearances. So every so often we always get a headline from Shawn Layden. We had a lot this week from this one podcast where he was speaking with Naomi Kyle on the Pause for Thought podcast. And so one of the first headlines that came out was how Shawn was talking about how games are pitched nowadays, the ones he's been hearing a lot lately, where he said, quote, "Sometimes a pitch will start and there'll be, this is the monetization and this is how we're going to capture the total addressable market. I've had to stop some people and say, hey, hold on, no, wait, what's the fun part?" So Shawn spent more time explaining that part in that so many pitches are front-loaded with the business model, and he has to bring them back down to ask them, well, this is a video game. What is enjoyable about this video game? And what's so fascinating is that that is not the first time I've heard that from not just Shawn, but like various GDC talks and books I've read over the years. But it always comes down to that. If somebody has been in a position where they take on pitches, they almost always like to hear about the video game, like the part that's fun, what's unique about the gameplay loop. And I guess that's the other weird angle, is that oftentimes they'll be getting pitches where it's like way too heavy on, this is how we make money, this is how we're going to address the market, this is how we're going to do monetization and battle passes in recent years, of course. But even 10, 20 years ago, I guess another issue was people are spending too much time on other aspects of the game like lore. And it's like, well, bring me back down. What is the gameplay loop? What are we actually making here? What's fun? Shawn even spoke a little bit about how with his time at SIE and at the time Sony Computer Entertainment, they had 3 key pillars for, greenlighting games, which would have been games they basically have to make that would be for new platform launches, whether it's a failing platform like a Vita or a PSVR, like games you have to make for those systems in the early days, but also just straight up console launches. You have to build games for your own platforms, but games they have to make. And then the 2 main ones would be innovative. So is it something where they feel like it's experimental and entirely new and a novel concept, or is it something where it's best in class? The best way he explained this was that we're not going to approve the 3rd best racing game out there. We're going to approve a Gran Turismo. So it's a very good methodology to go by, and that's how PlayStation historically has put out such high caliber games over the years. But it was really interesting hearing him air it out like that. Now, the other headline that we got from Shawn Layden was about consoles and console exclusivity. Is it dead? Is it going away? So we have another quote here where Shawn says, "I don't think every game has to be console exclusive. I don't think every game should be console exclusive, but I do accept the fact that if you're going to have platform companies like Sony and Nintendo, largely, Microsoft is more of the Xbox anywhere, everywhere, there is a huge value to the brand of having strong exclusives. If Mario starts showing up on PlayStation, that's the apocalypse, right? Cats and dogs living together. And the same thing goes for Nathan Drake and Uncharted. I think they make the platforms sing." And Shawn also acknowledged that multiplayer games do demand a larger audience in order to succeed. But, he still believes in the traditional model of console exclusivity. But the thing is that it kind of goes in the face of another comment that came up, which was about how do we grow the console market. And this is something we've spent some time talking about over the years on LTPS. And this largely does come from Shawn, in that the console marketplace has a ceiling on how many consoles are ever really sold in any given generation. It's almost always not exceeding 250 million. He brings up the Wii as one example where they sort of broke past that a bit because a lot of people were buying Wiis and Wii Fit, so you sort of broke into that more casual market, the kind of gamer that when you talk about the billion plus number, that's somebody that's playing Candy Crush on a smartphone, right? So they broke out of that a little bit during that platform cycle. But anyway, talking more about how do they break through that barrier, Shawn explained that it's similar to the VHS versus Betamax scenario. VHS won because it licensed the format across different manufacturers. So, quote, "People didn't understand that need of having the same machine as your neighbor. You can have an RCA TV and you can have a Sony TV, and that's all fine, but once your neighbor has picked VHS and you want to watch that movie, but you have Betamax, all of a sudden, so industry coalesced around VHS. Then later on, Sony and Philips created the Compact Disc Consortium. They created the patent, and then they licensed it out to all the other manufacturers. Same thing happened with DVD. Same thing happened with Blu-ray. They said that they'll compete on the device, even though they'll both support the platform, but they'll have different bells and whistles." So just to clarify, like, he's being asked these questions when one answer is, well, here's what we need to do, consolidate everything. But then he also said platform exclusives still matter. He's just being asked these questions in isolation. So even though it looks like he's going back on his word, he's just simply asking or answering those things directly. Having said that, the thing that I find fascinating about the second answer to that, or rather the one about the consolidation of the games platform business, if we want to break past the 250 barrier, is that we're seeing that because we, for the longest time in this business, only had 3 major players. One of them has effectively dropped out. And, effectively as in like on a technical basis, sure, they're around. They still make and ship Series S, X, and we're expecting another Xbox. But we had that apocalypse moment, as Shawn implied, with Halo shipping on PlayStation. They have had their second moment. So we are consolidating. Now, the weird thing is that like that consolidation I don't think is necessarily going to equate to breaking past that 250 million barrier, because the reality is he's also implying that other manufacturers need to be making PlayStation 5s or Nintendo Switch 2s, for example, right? But there's a layer to what he's saying as far as how it's already happened. But it's it's always the same discussion before. The consoles are like still by design very traditional. It is a crazy thing to think that consoles can still operate the way that they're operating when nowadays people would think it's insane to buy a Blu-ray player and you only can play movies on that one Blu-ray player. But like exclusivity is all around us. It just comes in different shapes and sizes. So even though we're in a very digital streaming era, there's platform exclusives by way of that. Oh, you can only rent this movie on this one platform. You have to subscribe to this platform to get access to this series of a 20-year-old TV show that you like. Oh, well, now that deal's up, it moves over to another one. The barriers are like there's far less friction in that circumstance. You don't need hardware necessarily, but exclusivity still reigns supreme in all sectors. So it's with consoles, at least they're just a few steps behind, but the consolidating has happened, and now we've just primarily got, I would argue, PlayStation and Nintendo, and naturally PC. Although the weird thing about PC is with how absurdly expensive it's getting, that can be cost prohibitive too for certain folks that want to buy and play and maintain a very reliable machine in that department. Moving on to some third-party news stories, the EA shareholders have overwhelmingly voted in favor of approving the $55 billion leveraged buyout, so it is happening. Now, the reason why there's an overwhelming majority of shareholders happily approving that is because this is not really an ethics thing. It's a matter of them getting a 25% premium on their investment, so they're being bought out at $210 a share. So whether somebody ethically cares for the deal or not, if they're for or against it, the whole idea is they got their bag. That was the point of the buyout. They're getting bought out. So it's like one of those things where you don't care what happens after because you're getting paid anyway. So 99%, they're all in favor. That should be going through on that end. There's still other verticals at play, but at least for EA and that crazy deal of going private with the PIF, that is still on track. Next up, the Silent Hill series producer has made some bold claims for the franchise where, based on the recent success and launch of the 2024 Silent Hill 2 remake and 2025's new spin-off-ish entry, Silent Hill F, they want to try and have more entries on a annualized basis if they can help that. So recently speaking with Famitsu, we have the translation here by Genki_JPN on Twitter. The series producer, Matoyo Okamoto, said the series is back on the map with Silent Hill 2 and F, and so including announced and unannounced games, they aim to release a new entry at a pace of about 1 per year. Which, that makes me a little bit uneasy. I'm not sure that's exactly what we need to be doing when we just had 2 very strong releases in the franchise. 2 tight-knit experiences that were really compelling, enjoyable, and they actually handled the source material well for 2, and it was 2 different studios that handled these games. It's, I don't want to say miraculous, but it's like, wow, they really did pull it off. Silent Hill is back. I don't think it's really encouraging to then hear like, great, now we're going to be doing them every year. And that's not to say they have a roadmap of 5-something games for 5 years, obviously, but they've reasonably got 2 or 3 in the back burner that they would maybe like to see a release cadence of 26, 7, and 8. And that's just me speculating, but I don't know if that's really the path we should be going down. And I would think that the producer is at least letting it out there already of like, we'd like to do that. Doesn't mean it's going to happen because we won't compromise on integrity if the 2026 game needs more time in the oven. So don't compromise on quality. Make sure you're still putting out a great Silent Hill game. Next up, this is the year that Atlus is celebrating 30 years of Persona games. And so in celebration of that, they've prepared a 30th anniversary website where it does show that there's going to be an update planned for January 8th. And presumably the site will be updated over time. And Atlus is certainly the kind of publisher, and many other Japanese publishers do this. All of them like to do this, which is, that doesn't mean you're going to get big game announcements. So I would at least caution that on January 8th, and probably any other dates that do pop up over time, very likely you're going to see some merch announcements or things you can buy, maybe some new key art, things like that, which is cool. That's obviously a great way to celebrate anniversaries, but more pertinently, we do want to know about game projects as well. So at least alongside that, we do have the creative producer and chief director Kazuhisa Wada speaking with Famitsu, where they revealed that they are preparing a number of announcements and they will be talking about the Persona 4 revival as well. So that is likely some news that we'll get at some point in this year, but I know for many others, myself included, we are also patiently awaiting for some Persona 6 news. Because Persona 5 at this point, I love those characters in that universe. I'm repping Kawakami hard all day, every day. But, at a certain point, we want to not really be living the Skyrim life, and we want to see the next entry. So I would sincerely hope that this will be the year where we may get something. Moving on to more Gen AI stuff going on in video games, because I'm sure you all love hearing this stuff. It does keep coming up a lot, and so we do have the Level 5 director openly expressing their support for the technology. And so Akihiro Hino has openly expressed their support for Gen AI on their personal Twitter account, where they were saying that game companies are incorporating it for efficiency and time savings. And so for one unreleased game at level 5, they're not using AI to code 80 to 90% of the game. That was a misunderstanding that people might have heard before, and they have not reached that just yet. But they do say it's a time savings that can't be dismissed, and they propose a world where instead of 5 to 10 years of AAA games, they come out every 2 years. And that while AI can produce plagiarized content when it's misused, it does still have the power to enrich the creative world. So very much they are in support of the medium. And that's the thing about AI too, is that you are going to have people just be fully in support of it, and they think that there's so much upside that it can't be ignored. You've got some publishers that are trying to walk that fine line of like, well, hold on a second, we played around with it, it didn't work, like your Sandfall Interactive. You've got some that still want to explore it, and they have to, explain that away, like Larian recently we're going through. And the crazy thing about the whole Larian scenario, which, I think it was good that we had this come out from the transcript where Jason Schreier released that transcript, and you got full context on what they were saying. And so the CEO openly explained that we are looking for the efficiency, we're not really finding it just yet. And that might also be just chalked up to AI still being, at its core, a very infant thing, because there's this bubble that people think are going to burst because, AI is still vastly developing and everyone's investing like crazy into the space, and that's why we're also running into these crazy knock-on global economic effects of crazy GPU prices and the RAM crisis, and so everything's sort of still ballooning and growing, and it's AI itself is still getting better. There's that big difference between Will Smith eating spaghetti 2 years ago, and now he's doing it today, and it looks very synthetic, sure, but at least he doesn't look like a monstrosity. So, in theory, you have Larian saying, yeah, we tried it, and we didn't really save any time from it, but who knows what 2, 3, 4 years does look like. And it's still the stance I have, is that can it be used effectively in game development? Almost certainly. Well, I mean, you're going to have some studios not even bother disclosing it, because at this point, it's just, they don't even have to. They're not going to get penalized for it. There's no regulation. It's a Wild West. So you're going to have some not even disclose it, and it's going to get to a point where it's completely indistinguishable, and you don't even know that the games you're playing were made and built with AI. But it really depends on what angle of the game was even using Gen AI to begin with, right? So it's really tough to say, especially if you have, an ethical stance on the use or misuse of it. And if you're somewhere in the middle, it makes it even harder for you to ethically, sort of come to terms with it. And that's sort of where I am. Like, I know it's going to get used, and there is upside to it. It can be an extension of human work. It can probably accomplish a lot of things that human work can't ever reasonably do. But is it going to replace human work? Almost certainly, and I hate that aspect of it. Is it going to start creating things that humans otherwise could have crafted with heart and soul, and the thing that drives us all to get up in the morning? Yeah, like, I don't like that either, but I don't know, it's for some, they're like 100% in, others they're 100% no, and nobody's really going to win here, and if you're in the middle, it's even tougher. So with that in mind, I think it's always important to remember the other side of people that really believe in the technology and they want to be able to ship games that much faster. I will add too, the thing is, I'm not even sure I want games to ship that fast. Like, it's that weird thing I always talk about, right? Where it's like, man, it really sucks that Naughty Dog is spending 7-something years making a new IP. And it's like, on a studio-by-studio basis, that's what sucks. But also, like, I might be waiting 7 years for Naughty Dog to ship a new IP, but my God, my backlog has never been bigger. It's literally never been bigger. So games still come out all the time. There's still compelling experiences everywhere, no matter where you look. So I don't know if I really want to see games ship that frequently. I don't want 7 years, but I don't know if I'm ready for it to go back to 2 years either, with just the sheer volume of games that come out nowadays. I don't know. That's kind of where I sit on the whole thing. It's maybe more complicated than it seems, but there's just a lot of ways it can be discussed. Moving on to some PlayStation Productions updates, we have one for The Last of Us Season 3, where Danny Ramirez, who played Manny in The Last of Us Season 2, he's on Abby's crew, so he didn't show up in every episode, and I don't really think he has that much screen time. He doesn't show up too often, but by the time Season 3 comes around, you should see a lot more of him. Well, he's not going to reprise his role for Season 3, so based on a report from Deadline, due to scheduling conflicts, he's going to be recast, and I hate seeing that. If there's one thing that I really dislike, sometimes it has to happen, but usually, like in a game, for example, if the voice is recast, it's such a turnoff to me, because while the new person might do a really great job and put a lot of energy and heart into it, at the end of the day, like, I can always tell that was not the same person, so it just sounds like an entirely new character, and it really breaks immersion for me and continuity. And so doing that with real life actors, like, that is going to break it so much for me. And so that already, like, is kicking Season 3 off in just the worst way possible. Because, for some people, you can't wait to watch Season 3 and see that Abby crew go through their 3 days. And Manny plays a big part in that. I mean, he's right there near the end of Season 2 as well. So that I'm not thrilled with. But, we're going to be getting probably a lot more stories about Season 3 as it kicks off a lot of its production. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. You can follow the link down below or scan the QR code and enter the Gleam giveaway. Supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are some of the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all. And our Tuesday video was a breaking story from Insider Gaming about the RAM shortage and how that's causing manufacturers like Sony and Microsoft to consider maybe delaying their new machines past their 2027-2028 release window. So we talked about that big rumor on Tuesday in a separate upload. And then coming up, it is a new year, folks. And you know what that means. our annual PlayStation predictions. So I'm not sure if that will be the next Tuesday upload. If it's not, it will be the one after. It depends on editing and scheduling and all that from my side. But otherwise, we are very close to, yes, doing our annual predictions that we've been doing since 2015 now at this point. So absolutely insane. No, 2014. I don't remember. We've been doing this a long time, but for some folks, they look forward to that all the time. So we'll be doing that very soon. And I think Click R3. I think we're going to do Click R3 the week after that as well, which me and John are now doing our own predictions separately as well. So we're doing that too. But anyway, I think that's about it. I've been playing games. You'll be proud of me playing games outside of 30 Platinums. That has been super fun. Let me tell you, Luminous Arise. Oh my God, the PSVR 2 version, so good. Got damn near emotional playing that game. To love that series on PSP 2005, 20 years ago, and then experiencing it in VR was just magical. And I feel like I had to share that with you. It's been so fun just enjoying that game, and I'll be starting up more things soon, thankfully. But anyway, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.